On today's episode of the CLS Experience, we have a very exclusive treat. She's known as the Millennial Therapist, and she shares tips and content to normalize human experiences and encourage self-reflection, which is currently pivotal. She is an existential psychotherapist, and she's received her undergraduate degree in psychology, and she has an MA in counseling psychology. No big deal. She became interested in psychology from her personal experience living through wars, navigating complex relationships, and continually learning what it means to be human. She's been featured in a plethora of media sources such as Oprah, Daily, Marie Curie, Cosmopolitan, and Women's Health, just to name a few. Her ability to make mental health content easily digestible is second to none, and she's here to teach you all of the tips and tricks needed for you to cultivate deeper relationships with others and maybe even more importantly, with yourself. She's just a juggernaut in all facets of life and a terrific human being. Please welcome the wise, beautiful, and brilliant, the abundant and dynamic Sara Kuburic. How you doing, Sara?
Oh my gosh, how am I supposed to do after an introduction like that? That was so sweet. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I'm flying right now. I'm like stumbling my words. It's early in the morning here in New York. I just got back from a nice run. I know you're traveling, and we've been trying to get together quite some time. The audience and the listeners are in for such a treat today. My best suggestion, in case our listeners were not familiar with you, Sara, is guys, do a deep dive, play catch up, check out all of her awesome content. What I think is most valuable today is we just have an unbelievable, deep, and powerful conversation. Before we start, we're going to get a little weird. You ready for me, Sara?
I don't know. I'm about to find out.
Sara, what is your superpower?
Oh, um, my intuition. I think I have a very, very powerful intuition. Depends if you want me to elaborate on that or not, but I think
You do.
privately, professionally, I think a lot of my professional decisions that I've made have been the biggest check for me is this in alignment with who I am? The first check is not, is this going to get me to that goal? Is this what successful people do? Is this what I think I should be doing? The first check is always, does this align with the person that I am and who I want to become? And so I think having that gut feeling and trusting that gut feeling has been really huge for me. And same with my personal life, same with the way that I write content. It's all about being very intuitive with like what I'm experiencing and what I think is going to resonate with others.
This is so good because I couldn't relate anymore. And it's funny because it
Mm,
took me a long time, 35 years to be exact, to finally start leaning into my intuition. And as I like to see, people think what we've done in the last couple of years have been overnight success, but I've been working on myself for a very long time. But also one thing that I like to say is it doesn't take time. It just takes alignment, right? When you're in
mm,
alignment and you have a lit soul and you're a vibrational match for all that abundance and so forth. And a big part of getting into alignment is listening to that intuition. And sometimes it won't scream at you. Sometimes it's just a little
mm,
whisper, but you have to
absolutely.
listen to that, right?
So well said. I think recognizing that voice is crucial because there are a lot of voices going on. There is fear, there is insecurity, there is past wounds, there are a lot of things that are happening within us, and being able to differentiate that powerful wisdom, that genuine intuition from those other voices is key.
Yeah, hell yeah. So good. And also on the flip side, like I don't know about you, but for me, like if I ever, well, nowadays I do a much better job at listening to the intuition. But if I ever like, have an intuition and I go against it, I would say probably 10 out of 10 times it would always bite me in the butt. Would you agree?
Oh my God, like always 9.9. It's not an actual number, but it never works. And even if it does, it just won't give you the same sense of fulfillment or satisfaction. Let's say that you did something that wasn't super aligned, but you achieved a goal and you thought that's the way to go about achieving that goal, and you always wanted that goal, you'll still sit there not feeling genuinely fulfilled, I think, because the way you get there also matters.
100%. Isn't that what it's all about? The journey, right? We wouldn't
Absolutely.
have it handed to us anyway.
Yeah, it wouldn't mean the same thing.
Yeah, that's right. There's so many places we could take this conversation, and I want to hit on a lot of the cool topics that you talk about because I think they'll be so valuable. But first, it's no secret
Mhm.
you have a new book coming out. It's on me. Is that right?
Mhm. That is the title. Yes, I'm super, super excited. I feel like I've been producing a lot of content. It's been fairly short form for social media. I am a weekly columnist for USA Today, so that's a little bit longer, but I just haven't been able to really sink my teeth into something and present full, cohesive, nuanced ideas. And this is my first opportunity to do that in a non-academic setting, and I'm super excited.
I'm so excited for you. I can't wait to read it. The world's gonna be better for this book. The title is pretty cool and interesting. It's on me. What does that mean to
Mm.
you?
Responsibility. I mean, as an existential psychotherapist, I the foundation of my work is for us to take responsibility for the lives we live, for the people that we are, and the people that we become. And so I noticed that throughout my book, I kept writing, "It's on us, it's on you, it's on me," like just variations of that phrase. And I think that this book really encapsulates what it means to live the life you want and be the person you want to be. And there's absolutely no way to achieve that other than taking responsibility. And it is on you to get there. No one else can get you there. And so I think that's kind of, I wanted people to feel empowered, but also realize the responsibility that they have.
This is so interesting and awesome. Since I've really expanded and evolved as a human and working on myself, and definitely
Mm,
not perfect, but I'm better than I was. One thing that I really take pride in is assuming responsibility, ownership, and accountability. But I'm curious.
mm,
This is just off the cuff, like a little selfish question. Like, when is it possibly not good to take full ownership? Like, for example, even if like
mm,
we're growing and we're scaling and we have a team, and let's just say they make an error. I automatically say, what in my head, I'm like, what could I have done to communicate it more effectively so that error might have been prevented? I'm just always looking to assume accountability now compared to maybe not so much back in the day. Is there ever a time where assuming total responsibility is counterproductive?
Oh, absolutely. My God, when I talk about taking responsibility, it's for things you're actually responsible for. Taking responsibility for things you're not responsible for or couldn't have controlled, that's not what we're asking, right? That's like just human error, that's not knowing better, and it's okay to be gracious with yourself and take responsibility for things that you know are your fault. So if you missed an email and you screwed up everything, you can go, "Hey, I'm so sorry. That was on me. I should have responded. It was irresponsible, or it caused all these things. How can I help to fix it or remedy the situation?" But for example, you can't control every tiny little thing that your team does, and it's not your responsibility to do so. And so I think it's important. Sometimes it is our fault, sometimes it is our responsibility, and sometimes it isn't. And we need to learn the difference. And a lot of people can't. They either avoid responsibility altogether, or sometimes they take on all the responsibility for the individuals around them. And I think, the balance is in that beautiful middle that's a little elusive and sometimes difficult to grasp.
Yeah, and something that just came to mind is I know you talk about relationships a lot, and something
Hmm.
I can imagine someone might be in denial, and like let's just say they get cheated on, or the case may be, and like they're like, oh, it was my fault, I was doing this, but it probably wasn't their fault, or maybe they had something
Yeah.
to do with it. But you can't.
I,
Yeah, what were you
I
gonna
don't
say?
think the victim, I was going to say, I don't think the victim is ever at fault
Right.
in terms of maybe you didn't nurture the relationship that would have been, something that your partner wanted. Maybe you had many flaws. Maybe you upset your partner. Sure, take accountability for that. But for that action of infidelity, you didn't make your partner cheat on you. So there has to be a boundary within what we're going to take responsibility for. But yeah, a lot of people will go, "Oh, it's my fault that they cheated," or on the opposite end, it's like it was their fault I cheated. And it's like your partner didn't make you cheat. You
Right.
allowed yourself to violate that contract of the relationship, and that's fully on you.
Yeah, this is really deep stuff, and I think these make for the most meaningful conversations. One of the
Mhm.
cool things that you talked about often is toxic positivity. And it's interesting
Mm.
because I like to consider myself delusionally optimistic because since I reinvented myself, I'm always thinking about like what can go right as opposed to the old Craig that would kind of think about what can go wrong, and it's worked out for
Mm.
me. But I'm curious, what
Yeah.
is like what would you consider to be toxic positivity?
Look, I think positivity is a fantastic tool for manifestation and having a more objective outlook, especially if you're, naturally a more negative or anxious individuals who always seeks to find what will go wrong. That being said, I think when your positivity, quote unquote, starts to invalidate your feelings or where you begin to deny reality, that's when it's not very helpful. You can be super positive and then choose not to do anything to ensure that that positive outcome comes to fruition. And then that's really useless as well. So it's like, as long as you're still grounded in reality, as long as you're still taking accountability, as long as you're not dismissing your feelings and only focusing on the positive, because life is not only positive. And so if you're only focusing on the positive, you're missing a whole element of yourself, a whole other dimension of what's actually happening for you, what's actually happening for the people around you. So just making sure you're not being dismissive of that.
Yeah, this is great because I'm thinking of like I imagine like a sports team where like the
Mm,
culture's a little messed up, they have a losing record, and they're being interviewed after the game. Like, oh, everything's great. Yeah, well, we got this. We're gonna turn it around. But that sounds
yeah,
toxic because in order to change something, you have to be aware of it, right?
yeah,
So it's good to be optimistic. I believe we could turn this around, but we have to make some internal adjustments. Where there's some stuff that we have to do. I guess maybe in my head, when you the way you just described it, which is beautiful, I think it maybe the word denial came to mind. Toxic.
absolutely. But and if you want to take it in academic terms, because I'm a nerd and that's where I go, it's being like, oh, I'm so optimistic, I'm gonna get like a 90 on my paper, but you did nothing to ensure that that will happen as well. It's like you're denying the fact that like you wrote it in 2 hours, you didn't check your references, and you're like, well, I'm optimistic it's going to happen. Or if something terrible happens to someone that you love, they lose a partner, a pet, they lose their job, saying something like it's all going to work out, it probably feels so dismissive in that moment. What the person often wants to hear is that you understand their pain, that you see how difficult that situation is. If you want to go into problem solving, check with them, and maybe they want that. But being really overly positive when someone is suffering is not genuinely what people respond well to.
Yeah, that's so good because recently I've been changing my approach to like how I reach out to someone that I care about,
Mm,
loved one, right? And oftentimes now I'll just be totally authentic. I'll just be like, I don't even know really what to say. I just want you to know that I'm thinking about you. I love you, and
mm.
I'm here for you in any capacity that I can be. And I know this is a really difficult season, as opposed to saying, "Oh, it's all going to work out," yet the person's gone. That doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, and you don't know that everything's going to work out. That's
No,
also an absurd promise to make to
true.
like, oh, it's going to be fine. And it's like maybe it genuinely won't be fine. And so I think we we need to just check ourselves, and a lot of the times we offer positive remarks as a way to alleviate our own discomfort, or because we don't know how to navigate the tense emotions and we don't know how to help them. And so then we say these things that we hope will become true, but I think it's really important to check ourselves and allow the person to sit in their pain, allow yourself to sit in the pain and be uncomfortable together if that's what the situation genuinely asks for.
Sometimes in order to heal it, you have to feel it.
Yeah. You have to go through it.
Yeah, 100%. That's something that I learned too somewhat recently. I used to just say, "Oh, I'm not available for that," but that's not how it works. And typically, yeah, if you dismiss it, it'll resurface, right? It'll keep
Yeah.
coming back until you kind of heal it or work to correct it or transform it or just go through it.
And often it becomes more aggressive. I feel like when we ignore that inner messaging, those red flags, those warning signs, and we suppress it, the natural response is that it has to get louder to get our attention. If you think about a child in a grocery store that's trying to get its parents' attention, first it might tug on the parent's sleeve, like, then he might be like, Mom, 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 Mom. And then eventually it'll start screaming and throwing things because it didn't get the response, it didn't get the recognition, it didn't get the connection, it didn't feel heard. And so I feel like that also happens with our internal stuff, where first it's like, hey, Sarah, maybe you should consider. And then at the end, it's like, Sarah. And it manifests in really loud ways where you're like, oh my God, because it wants you not to ignore it anymore. And I think it is kind of a lovely thing that, our mind does for us. It's like saying you have to deal with this, but at the same time, the longer you leave it, the less comfortable it's going to be.
So I'm just curious because I'm selfishly thinking about my puppy, who oftentimes when I'm on a Zoom, he has no idea why I'm sitting in front of a computer talking and not paying attention to him. So how
Of
would you
course.
handle that in the kid situation? Like if you were the
I
parent?
think in the kid situation, I think it's important to see what your kid is trying to achieve. Like, are they bored? And that's why they're like tapping you. And then you have to teach them a little bit about boundaries and about like how to keep themselves entertained and make sure that they have, things that make them feel excited about, I don't know, give them a toy or something. But speaking from not a parent at all. But I think it's important to go, if my kid is feeling neglected or if there is a need that's not being met, that needs to be addressed. If this happens all the time, we need to figure out, why is it happening? Do they feel not loved? Do they feel ignored? Do they feel like, what is happening for them? And I think, a pet is a little different than a child. With a child, maybe you can communicate, but I think it's important not to dismiss behaviors like that, because a lot of parents are like, oh, that's just annoying. Which, yes, of course it is, but figuring out what the need there is key.
Yeah, this is great. And for the audience, I highly suggest you check out all of Sarah's content immediately following this conversation. One of the many reasons why I
Thank
wanted to connect is because a lot of the stuff that we're talking about now and your content specifically, it's relatable to anyone and everyone in any
you.
capacity, right? Like this isn't like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur or I'm not. It's not for me. Or this stuff can help everybody, right? Even just like emotional intelligence and how to handle situations and taking responsibility. And it could really change your relationships in your life, but also with yourself, right?
Mm. Oh my God, absolutely. And I do think that your relationships with others are, to an extent, a manifestation of your relationship to yourself, right? Everything's going to be colored through the way that you behave, treat, speak to yourself. And so, how you feel about you will inform how you act towards others. And I think a lot of people, will come to sessions. I'm a clinician, in case that wasn't clear, but they will they will come into sessions and sometimes be like, "Oh, I just want to be a better partner for my girlfriend, for my boyfriend, for whatever, or I just want to be a better person for someone else." And that's their goal. And I always reframe that of like, great, we can of course, work on tips, tricks, communication, boundary setting, all that great stuff. But let's talk about your relationship to you, right? Like that's so important, especially if you're in therapy. It's got to be about you and it has to be for you,
Wow.
right? Like you can't be like, my partner forced me to go to therapy, so how do I become a better husband? Like that's not the point. The point is like, how can you grow and learn and evolve in a way that's going to serve you? How can this be a beneficial time for you? And so I think it's important for people to, if you're struggling with your partner, your colleague, it doesn't really matter with who, always go back to like, what's happening in my current relationship with myself? And is there any correlation there?
Yeah, this is deep. And it's so, in one perspective, it's so exciting that we can continuously work on ourselves and be able to
Mm,
manage things better and so forth. And in regards to certain relationships with yourself, I know I was looking at a piece of your content and I saw you talking about how most of the time when we judge others, we're really just triggered. And I think
mm.
that's that everybody can relate to. And maybe what is something that we can do to rectify that or fix it and understand that when we're feel some type of way about someone else, it's really a reflection of how we feel about ourselves.
Yeah. And I think sometimes just hearing that sentence is helpful. Next time you're like, "Oh, that person's not working hard enough. They're not putting in, I don't know, the same hours, but they're being promoted. And so now I'm jealous." Or that girl's dress is too short, but really you're just jealous because she has fantastic legs and you feel like you're insecure about your legs. Whatever it is, it can, broad spectrum of potential triggers here. I think it's important to go, okay, what is jealousy trying to communicate with me? There are certain emotions that as a society we're really uncomfortable with. And so jealousy and anger, for example, are two of them. but they're not bad emotions. We need to stop treating them as bad, quote unquote, emotions. They're messengers, which means that they're trying to communicate something with you. And if you find yourself being jealous, stop for a second and go, great, what do they have that I want? What is it trying to tell me about how I feel about my body, how I feel about my job? Do I feel like I'm working too hard and not being recognized? And just allow it to be a springboard for self awareness and self reflection, and then allow yourself to treat that person as your higher self, meaning like treat that person the way you think your future self, which is like a phrase we use for like you're aligned, you're authentic, your like true self would treat them, right? So being like, right now, I really want to like say something passive aggressive, but I know that my true self, the person I'm trying to become, would be kind and understanding or remove themselves from the situation. So that's how I'm going to act. But yeah, use jealousy as a springboard. And if you're judging someone and, that was like derailed, but if you're judging someone and there are negative emotions that come up for you, just really allow yourself to explore what they mean and what they're trying to tell you and why you think that what they're doing is morally wrong, triggers you, are you projecting, whatever's happening, take it as an opportunity.
Yeah, hell
I
yeah.
like
Like,
totally derailed that answer. I was
no,
like,
these are the best. They're straight off the cup, and it's so conversational. These are my favorite conversations. And sometimes something that I found to be useful also is a shift in perspective. So, for example,
mm,
let's just say you see somebody that's a little bit further ahead and they're winning, right?
hmm,
Instead of getting jealous or feeling resentment, maybe a different perspective is even if you don't love the person, clap when you see others win because they're showing you, they're showcasing what's possible. And it's only a
absolutely.
matter of time before you get the experience and you also can get there. So shift the perspective is also helpful, I think.
Oh my God, so much. And I think, if you have that much self resentment or self hate or self condemnation that like it's coming out with other people and that's making you feel better, is, by judging others, it's really, I feel sad. I never feel like, oh, they're a mean person. They're not a mean person. I honestly think that they're probably a little sad. Imagine having that much negativity and that much self hate go towards you every single day. It's such a difficult existence to kind of hold and be a part of. And so next time you see someone who's super judgmental, I think it's helpful to see them as someone who's often suffering.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. I have to ask you this selfishly. The
Hmm,
whole dating world right now, like, it's very complex and interesting.
hmm.
Everybody has their different values and so forth. What is your position on monogamy?
Oh my God. Um, if it works for you, great. If it doesn't work for you, great. I've always been monogamous. It's always been something that I've gravitated towards. It's what makes me feel the most safe. It's what makes me feel, I think having a relationship with one person is a lot of work. So having multiple people, it feels like too much work in my personal like opinion. But I also think for me, like the whole concept of modern monogamy also makes sense of like people come into your lives. It's like one person at a time. In terms of like, people come into your lives for certain stages, and then at some point they may no longer align with where you are in life or who you have become. And that's a little sad. And so I'm not saying that that has to be everyone's truth, but I think that that's kind of the general conceptualization that I have around monogamy and my beliefs around it.
Yeah, and I love the way you articulated that. Like, it doesn't mean you're right and someone else is wrong. This is just how you feel. But a word that you used there that I could really resonate with that felt good was the word safe.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think, you need to see what are you looking for? What is a healthy relationship for you? And I know what that is for me. And the only way to get that for me is through monogamy. And also I need to understand that like the way I was raised and worldview and culture and all these things feed into this construct I have of monogamy. And so I know it's not a super popular opinion nowadays, but I'm definitely pro monogamy. And I think if you can
Same.
find a partner and you can stay with them for 50, 60, 70, 80 years, that is so beautiful and so rare. But I think where I come in is like I don't think monogamy is worth self-sacrifice. and not just like, yeah, compromise and sacrifice for the relationship, but you shouldn't sacrifice who you are as a person. So if you're miserable, I don't know if I would be like, keep being miserable forever for 50 years because you made this commitment. So this is where I think I'm a little more lenient to like make sure the relationship keeps aligning, make sure you're making, working towards it aligning. But if it doesn't, you don't need to suffer for it. So yeah.
Beautifully said. I'm just curious, what's important to me now in a relationship since I met my fiance and since I kind of reinvented myself is significantly different than what was a few years back.
Mm, of
And
course.
I got out of a couple of toxic relationships, but I have nobody to blame. I was repeating a similar pattern. And once I
Mm.
realized that, I was able to be available for something different. And then, the universe aligned, so to speak. What are some really important values in a relationship for you personally?
Um, Actually, you know what? I want to hear what your values are. Give me like a value or two of what became really important to you in the last
Turning
couple
the
years.
tables on me. I love it.
Yeah.
You know, a word that gets thrown around a lot when with these types of conversations is communication, and I totally get that. I definitely think it's important. But for me
Yeah.
personally, um, something that really sticks out is respect. And what I mean
Ooh.
by that is like you don't have to agree with everything that the partner does or loves to do, but as long as you can respect it. And then something else is supportive. Just really supportive, like your
Mm,
biggest fan and always goes to bat for you. And then some that, maybe I shouldn't say are less important, but also stick out are humor and stuff
yeah.
like that. I'm monogamous as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, one that I really stand by is respect. And I think that was lacking in some prior relationships. And finally being able to understand that was really helpful for me when I finally found my person. Your turn.
That's beautiful. Yeah. I think someone who prioritizes their, I don't want to say mental health because I think that's too narrow, but like who prioritizes growth as much as I do. Like someone who is reading, trying to learn, trying to be the better version of themselves, who's kind of on this journey of self development or self growth is really important. And we don't even have to do it the same way. And it doesn't always have to even mean the same thing. But I think that's such a huge value for me that having someone who also has that value and gets excited about these things is really important. Um, I think someone who is reliable is huge. I
Hmm,
think there's
good
so
one.
much in this world that it's like, who can really be your anchor and who can kind of, if your life is pretty hectic and you're working and you're traveling, someone that will really ground you. And I think that that's absolutely huge. Humor is a big one for me. I think of course, you've talked about all the important ones, so now I'm going into like the secondary. But humor, I think, is so great. Like having someone to laugh with, and sometimes all you can do in life is laugh because it's so absurd. And I think someone with a great sense of humor can just make it so much more fun.
It's the best.
Plus, I think I'm pretty hilarious, so I think I need someone who can appreciate that.
Oh yeah, and I agree. I think so too. And it's true because I know you often talk about like life is absurd and weird,
Yeah.
right? And let's have fun and get messy with it. And you know, we're still building our brand, so to speak, and there's a lot of work involved, but there's a lot of exciting development is moving very fast. But I love to just laugh sometimes, especially like the silliness. And even like I'll go back to some of my content when I first started a couple years back, and it's hilarious. I didn't even have a laptop for the first 8 months. Okay? I was just going like this. But as I like to say, like if you're not embarrassed with who you were a year ago, you're probably not growing. So you got to have fun with it, and you can't take it too seriously. I used to take things way too seriously, and it's just
Mm,
so much more fun to be able to understand that life is absurd and just have that perspective.
absolutely. And I think the hardest balance for us to strike is like not taking everything so seriously, but then making sure we take certain things more seriously than society does. And it's really that like most things don't matter. Like most things really in a year from now, in a month from now won't matter. And you might as well just have fun, enjoy and try to figure out what's happening and be in that messy journey of things. And then there's certain things that I think we don't take very seriously that we probably should. And so it's just finding that balance of like, what will you dedicate your seriousness to?
Fair enough. What's something that comes to mind when you say certain things you should probably take a little bit more seriously?
I think relationships in general, I think we have such a lonely world right now. And I think people are feeling isolated and they're feeling
Divisive.
misunderstood. And it's just so hard. And I think, we've made dating kind of like a takeout menu where it's like Uber Eats or Tinder, like they're next to each other and they work on the same premise. And, although accessibility increases accessibility, arguably, and all these different things, it's taken the humanity out of it a little bit. And I think it's everyone's looking for a partner to satisfy them or to give them what they're looking for. Kind of like, I'm ordering this meal and it better come exactly how I ordered it. And that's just not it. So I think we started to really dehumanize one another, look at the utility of what the other person can give you. And that's in work context too, instead of actually connecting with colleagues who are like, oh, well, he knows him. Or if I'm close with him, maybe he'll put my name down for the next promotion. It's just like, let's just be a community. Let's just prioritize friendships, not just romantic relationships, friendships. Most people don't have very good friendships, especially when they get into like long-term relationships. They become each other's worlds, and that's also unhealthy. And so I just think we need to take how we treat one another more seriously. That's one example.
I love this conversation. So there's that. I love you already.
Mhm.
But
Yes.
you mentioned the word humanity there, and I agree. And this is totally off topic, but is it safe to say that you're not 100% the biggest fan of AI and all that
Oh,
art, because that kind of removes a lot of the humanity and connection.
look, it's so difficult in terms of like, I'm still reading about it.
Same.
I think if we, what is the purpose of AI? Is it to assist humanity, replace humanity? Which one is it? And people are against calculators and now we use them and we're grateful for them. People hesitated with like computers and now, it enhanced the way that we function. There has to be a boundary. There has to be limitations. There has to be safety protocols. There has to be all these things. Again, I'm not an expert on it. I just think that in general, AI is almost the least of our worries. I think the fact that we have, even psychology, which stems from, a lot of beautiful philosophy and connection and observation of humanity, it's become very diagnostic. It's like you fit into this box or you don't. You get these skills or you don't. And everything is like science forward, which is amazing. But I think we need to remember that, psychotherapy is also an art. And so I always promote like there is something intuitive about being a therapist. There is something that's an art form about being a therapist. It's not just going through a checklist with your client. And so I think that as a society, we've just kind of decreased our appreciation for what it means to be human.
Yeah, I agree. And I love the way that you phrase that. Like, what is the objective? Is it
Yeah.
to replace us or is it to assist us? And then
Yeah.
we go from there. I don't know. I feel like we have like similar souls, like big on connection and
Huge.
humanity and the human spirit and being able to build rapport. And
Hmm.
I just don't know how a computer can do that.
Yeah. And we never we never know, but that's what, yeah, I am not an expert. I haven't read, I'm only dipping my toes into all that information now, and I generally don't like to speak out of turn. It's like if it's
Yeah.
something I don't know much about, I don't want to fear monger, like I don't want to make people scared just because I heard one scary thing about it. I just want to educate myself first.
Same. I feel the same way, and I don't want to be judgmental. Which is that
Yeah.
I think of like you, like I visualize you like making a blog about a past experience and taking a lesson from it and how people can benefit from your experience to it. And there's feel
Mm.
you have to feel something from that experience to kind of pour it into other people. And I don't want that to be replaced.
I don't want that to be replaced either. And I don't know if it ever can. I think we shared the experience of being human.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, AI will ever be able to replicate what it feels like to sit in front of another human, look into their eyes, feel their energy, and just genuinely connect and have this like, my soul resonates in you moment. I
Yeah.
don't think a computer will be able to do that. But I don't know.
And also, I want to say, I want to be responsible. Like, there's definitely certain things that I imagine it can help people with a great deal, with like marketing and stuff like that. So just like you, I'm
Sure.
also doing my homework, but it was straight off the cuff.
Hmm.
It's so much fun, honestly, this conversation.
I love it.
Yeah, the best conversations are when they're all over. It's not like a certain agenda and so forth.
You definitely got that today.
Yeah, hell yeah. Yeah, definitely. Um, in regards to like communicating with a potential partner, it's interesting because when you're going to date someone, and let's just assume that the person that's looking to date is looking for something serious, like they want to find their person, you don't want to waste
Mhm,
time, right? But at the same
mhm.
time, you don't want to like be too serious right out the gate. So how and when should somebody communicate their needs to a potential partner to kind of make sure that their values are in alignment?
Whew, maybe people won't everyone agree, but I think right off the bat, I mean, everything about you should be congruent with what you need and want in a partner, right? And maybe when you sit down for first drinks, you're not like, and I want 3 children, and I want like I'm not saying do full disclosure, but you also probably shouldn't go into the first meeting being like, F marriage, I don't care about it. And it's secretly what you want. So I think it just always being aligned with those needs. And then as the situation presents itself, as the vulnerability increases, as it becomes a safe space, as it becomes a person you're interested in, then you disclose more and more. I think if someone asks you flat out, great, tell them. I don't think we gain anything by hiding it or postponing it. It just means that instead of going on 3 dates, you went on 15. So if you think that that was a great experience for you and you wanted to spend 15 days with someone that you knew wouldn't be the right person for you, sure. But if you don't want to waste your time, as you said, or you don't want to waste their time, then I think being honest is important. And look, if you're in your 20s and you don't know what the answers are to these questions, you might have to stay and date till you figure out what you want or don't want. But if you're like, and I mean, I'm making crazy generalizations, but if you're older and you've worked on yourself for a while, you might have a preconceived idea and you might be a little quicker to figure out if this person works for you or not, or be a little more comfortable disclosing your needs right away.
Yeah, beautifully said. And also, I like that, like congruency. You mentioned that word,
Yeah.
like be straight up and be upfront. But yeah, maybe not everything right out the gate on the first drink.
No, and it's like, yeah, you want the person to maybe know about your past, but it's like you don't need to tell them immediately. I think we need to also be tactful about things. We can be honest, but be tactful. This person doesn't know you, so you telling them about, your biggest trauma immediately can feel like a very unsafe space for them, and then become a very unsafe space for you. And so I just think it's about honoring the pacing of any relationship.
I like that, honor and the pacing. And also things might change, right? Like you might meet your person and be like, wow, this is better than I even envisioned. You know what? I
Totally.
wanted one kid, she wants to have two. I'm totally game for that. Just an
Let's have
example.
3. No, it's like, yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I love that you pointed that out. You might change. Every time you meet a different person, you learn a little more about yourself, and be open to someone changing your mind. However, just be careful that you're not self-betraying, self-abandoning because you're trying to please the other person.
Yeah, this is awesome. Something that I did for a while, and I imagine a lot of people do today, and I've seen you talk about it, is talking about why people seek relationships with people that are emotionally unavailable. And it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like I don't want to say a dead end, but maybe it's an uphill battle, so to speak. Why do people do that? And what's something that they can do to maybe be a little bit better when it comes to being selective with who they're pursuing?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many reasons why we might do that. One is that we ourselves are not emotionally available. We might not even realize that, but we really don't. We're not ready for the big leagues. We're not ready to commit. We're not ready to be vulnerable. We're not ready to support someone emotionally or let someone in to support us emotionally. And so then we find people that will allow us to remain the same, and people who will accept us being emotionally unavailable, and that's generally other emotionally unavailable people. And so oftentimes we end up seeking what we are. Another reason is maybe you grew up within a family system that had a lot of emotionally unavailable caretakers, or influential, individuals, and you just learn to associate love within the boundaries of like people being emotionally unavailable. And so you don't know what it feels like for someone not to be, and this feels familiar, and we tend to go for what feels familiar because then that feels safe. And so we've always seen people be emotionally unavailable, and so we'll end up dating people like that even though consciously we know that we want someone different. And so many reasons.
So good. Yeah. Well, the only negative I got going on is we don't have 10 hours to chat, but that's just the beginning of the friendship. We'll land the plane with this. Um, the term closure is
Oh,
interesting.
jeez.
You, I heard you talk about like it comes from us. I know there's a lot
Mm,
of people that like they feel incomplete unless they get their closure. Is that
mm.
like what do you think about that? And what really is closure? And do we really need it? And where does it come from? It's a loaded question.
Wow. So like 7 questions. I love it. So, look, I think wanting closure is normal. Your brain wants to put a bow around it, understand what happened, and set it to the side. And it's hard for it to do that until it has all the information. That being said, we rarely actually get that kind of closure. I think even if you ended up having a conversation with an ex, for example, that was really honest and respectful, you still might walk away being like, what happened? Because you two will have wildly different experiences of what has gone down. So it's super, super rare, even in the best of situations, for you to get the type of closure you want. I think a lot of people use closure as a way, as an excuse not to move on. I think they're waiting for something that they know they can't get, and they're willing to wait for it because they're not willing to close the door quite yet. They're not willing to stop that chapter and end that chapter. And so I think sometimes it is a bit of a crutch, a bit of an excuse. For me, closure comes from within in terms of how will you make sense of what has happened? What meaning will you take away? What lessons are you going to take with you moving forward? How are you going to choose, I guess, to close the chapter? Like this, and that's the meaning question. Like, this meant this to me. This is how I understand what happened. There's no objective what happened because I don't have their perspective. And that's it. How am I going to choose to move forward now? And I think, it's changing our relationship to our past. We can't change the past, but changing our relationship to that event, to that past, choosing how we feel about it now, how we choose to think about it now, how we choose to talk about it now, are all things we can do.
I think that's so good, so beautiful. You can't change the past, but essentially you can change the meaning you give it. And as a result,
Absolutely.
you can create a type of closure for yourself to move forward and be more available for what's next.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah. It's so good. I know the book's coming out. I imagine you are super excited about that. For our audience
Mhm.
listeners, what's the best way for all of them to support you? And obviously, what else are you most excited about right now in addition to the book?
Oh my gosh.
Where
Um,
do I begin,
yeah,
right?
where do I begin? Look, I'm so excited for my book. Obviously, the best way to support me is to read it and to have conversations about it. I don't even need you to agree with everything I say. I just want you to get curious. And the whole book is answering questions: who am I and why am I here? Those big existential questions. And if you're having a hard time figuring that out, this book is kind of for you. And I want people just to get curious. My goal was never to have people 100% agree with me. And so have conversations with your friends about it. What else am I excited about? Oh, I mean, so many things, but I think I'll be starting a new podcast very soon.
Really?
And I am very excited about that.
You
Yes.
have one already?
Nope.
Oh, so this is gonna be your first one.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Sorry, I shouldn't say a new podcast. I will be starting a podcast soon. I'll be dabbling in this space, and that's kind of my goal soon. A couple of projects coming up that I can't talk about yet, but yeah, that's
Understood.
that's it.
Congratulations on the podcast. You are perfect for that, to open up
Well,
those
thank
types of
you.
conversations and open up that space. I personally can't wait for it. And if you're ever looking for a guest, I'd love to support.
Oh my God, please.
Hell yeah. Yeah, this was so much fun. Hang out, Sarah. I want to
Much
connect
fun.
with you after for a second. I want you to know
Mhm.
the definition of being in alignment, responsibility, and authentic energy. I could personally guarantee your best is yet to come. Keep on spreading your wings and leaving your mark on this world. So much love and respect for you. Thank you so much for stopping by and dropping these priceless, juicy nuggets today.
Thank you so much.
That was so good. So much fun.
Thank you so much. I like rambled so many times or like
Oh,
this person's going to kill me. So,
to be honest with you, like I have a dopamine hit right now. Like I feel like
okay,
that was
good.
incredible.
I had so much fun.
Same, and I try to make it different. Like
Yeah,
for me personally, like when someone's like, "How'd you get here? Tell us about your background." It's like, how many times have you said that? I think it's cool to
so
just
many.
all the awesome content that really opens up the great conversations.
Absolutely. I think your format is genius and I love how natural it is. I mean, you're so good at it, obviously, but I think the way you approach these questions is great because there are certain questions it's like, "Oh my God, if I answered this question one more time." It's
Right.
like,
No, I
and
agree.
so I didn't feel that at all. And it was just kind of fun you pulling things from my content because obviously I create so much that sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, I did say that. It's like shit, what did I? No, I love it.
Let's definitely stay connected.
Please, I would love that.
Are you
I don't,
on your own Instagram or do you have like a team that does it?
I'm on Instagram. It's just me. I don't let anyone near my Instagram. It's like my baby. So please send
Same.
me a DM. I'll do the same
Yeah.
and let's stay in touch. I'll be in New York end of August for about 2 months.
Are you
So let
serious?
me know.
Months?
Yeah, because my book is out September 19. So I'm there for press before and after and some other stuff. So I love New York. I want to move to New York. So I'm just like testing out the waters slowly.
Let's try to create some time, even a small window, grab a cup of coffee at Soho House or whatever.
I would love that. That would be fantastic.
Can we exchange numbers?
Yeah, for sure.